Hey all, in this video, I'll be going through how to make a base mesh for a CG character. I start with just the fundamentals and build the character up from just a regular cube. This is another video in a series of how to create avatars for Unreal Engine. I'll be using the techniques from the last video on using Blender basics to create our model. This tutorial is going to be a little different. It's a process video. It's a slow and steady march through how to use the basics to achieve this mesh. This one's more of a Bob Ross pace, so you can follow along. There will be far fewer edits and clever cutaways to things. We'll be showing how I normally go through this process. You'll notice I don't do everything perfectly, but there are a lot of things that suit my needs in this video that you might find really helpful. So let's dive right in, shall we? So we got our new scene here. I'm gonna go ahead and rename the cube body. I'm very bad at organizing things, but I'm gonna try my best. So I'm gonna press 1 to make sure I'm in dead center. Now, I'm going to press tab to get into edit mode. I'm going to make a loop cut. I'm going to make my loop cut here. I'm going to press 3, and I'm going to delete the other side. So delete these vertices. And then, when I go over into the modifier panel, I'm going to add my mirror. So that's already off to a good start. We're just going to leave this. We're going to add our subdivision surface, and we're just going to leave this here for now. So it's time to start importing reference images. And this is where things get really, really helpful. So I'm going to press Command A again, and I'm going to go to Image, and I'm going to go Reference. So we'll get our T-pose photo. This is our most important photo. So we're going to pull this in. Now, by default, it's going to just look straight at us. So we can go into Blender's settings here and we can just reset all of its rotations. We can also do that with a keyboard shortcut. So we're in object mode still, but a lot of the same keyboard shortcuts that we discussed apply. I'm going to rotate like this. And what's really cool is that if I press 90, then suddenly I have 90 degrees. I could do it again on the Z-axis and press 90 again. Now, it's a little annoying that it's right in the middle of the orb, but we'll fix that. We'll move it up. So you can see that we've got our ball here, and we can start moving things up and down to match our model. However, things get a little tricky because what is our sense of scale? Now, in Blender and Unreal and in any 3D program, it will respect real-world scale. So if we want our model to be the same size as the person that we're trying to match to, we can do that. So it gets a little tricky here. Specifically, I'm American, so I use the imperial weights and measures that are so common here. So an easy way to know if you're modeling things correctly is to ask the person their height, and we're going to make a reference cube that will help us understand what that is. So I'm going to take the reference cube, and then in edit mode, I'm going to slide it up to like the top of its origin point here. That's all we have to do. We can tab in and out of edit. It's not a big deal. Now, if we press N, we can open like a really convenient sidebar here, and you can see the dimensions of our cube, 2 meters, 2 meters, 2 meters. We're going to go into the scene tab, and then we can change the units here. That's nice. So you can see it's right there. It's metric. We're just going to change it to imperial. So you can see the pounds, feet, all that stuff. Feet is fine. So we're just going to kind of judge the feet based on what we know. So I'm going to take this cube here, and then I can just keep scaling it up. But you can see how many feet it is over here. So person we're modeling today is she is 5'10". So that's going to be about like 5.85 feet. Now, you can see that if we had just started modeling right now, and we had just started like going at it and making something, we would have come up with something huge, just like 11.2 feet. It's always nice to just have one cube in here that helps you understand the max height. So I'm going to hide it, but I'm going to name it measuring cube. We'll bring back the measuring cube real quick. And you can see that I need to lose that. Something else cool that I can show you if it's been a minute and I need to like, let's say I can't press Control Z. Sometimes when I have a face selected, I will turn on this little button here, which is auto merge vertices. So I'll do that, and then I'll press G twice, and then I can slide down the loops. So the combination of those two means that when I click here, I have effectively reduced the geometry. So that double G slide thing is awesome. I love that. And let's make this cube a little skinnier. So if we press shift, we can also select every axis but one. So if we press shift and press Z and then move our stuff in, then we can 100% avoid using either of those other two axes, or using the Z axis, and we only use those other two axes. So we'll just keep this here as like a little measuring stick. So the next thing that's important, in this case, we want her to be the same height. Now, how do we judge that, right? So if we go into orthographic view by pressing numpad 5, then suddenly we have the ability to do that. Now when we press scale, we can, and press, all of our little keys here. And then just for a second, I'm gonna press H and I'm gonna hide this. So it'll come right back. Just need to hide it. And you can see this is starting to look like the right height. Now, you can see the shoes are sort of weird. You want the shoes kind of like on the midline. And then the rest of her can come right up to the point. And if we're on the same, hold on, let's just make sure everything's connected. And also, let's make sure that we're still at the same height. Yep, that 5.85. That's correct for feet. So now I'm going to press H to hide my measuring. I'm going to bring back the body cube. Now the body cube is centered and we want to leave it right where it is. So I'm going to move this one over. Now I have more images too. So I'm going to go ahead and bring out the rest of those images. I'm going to speed up a little bit because I think you kind of get the point on some of this stuff. So here's another one I've got. It's not correct. I'm going to press 90 on the rotation, but that's still not correct. So I'm going to press Alt-R to flatten the rotation. RY 90 to set up a side view. So when we press 3, we've got the side view. So we've got 1, got the main view. 3, got the side view. Now what happens when I start trying to edit the back of the model here? That gets really annoying. So there's a little trick we can do with these reference photos. So we can turn off the sides. So we can turn on the front side. You can see actually this photo is backwards. We want to type in 180, rotate it 180 degrees. Then side, we just want the front side. And that means every single time that we rotate away from this thing, then we're going to be able to see what we need. Nice. Now we can get size information here, like this, our scale specifically, this 0.49. I'm just going to copy it over here. I'm going to click and drag so I can grab everything, and then I can just copy it. And then now you know that we have the same size scale reference photos. So you see where the feet kind of go underneath our cube, our subsurface cube. Then I can do the same thing about right here. Now these are never going to match perfectly. They're always going to be a little off, and it's going to be a little bit annoying. But it's not a bad place to start. So lastly, here's another cool keyboard shortcut. I'm going to press Shift D. I'm going to pull this one out, and then I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. And this time, I'm going to go into the menu, and I'm going to grab another image. This image is roughly the same. This one's already scaled properly, or at least, oh, yep. So if we bring it down like right here, when you're taking these photos, you want to take them like at your hip. Like you don't want to have the camera be facing down on the person. Now we can actually start modeling. I'm just going to keep going back and forth between my views, and I'm just going to keep shaping this, and I'm going to be using mostly my G key for position. I'm going to make sure that clipping's turned on first, and then I'm just going to start grabbing stuff, and then I'm going to move in, and I'm going to make a torso. So G key there, and then here's S key for do a scale, and then we're going to do that also in line with the torso. Let's see how it looks on the side here. and then that's how we start. I'll make a cut here, sort of set up the shoulders a little bit. We'll see now it's a little bit too high. We'll select a face, and then we'll drag it down. I have this like down sort of to the pelvis line. So I like to press 2 to select an edge, pull up the edge, and then you can see we kind of create like a little bit of a hip joint thing here. So I'll press 3 to select a face, and I'm going to extrude. However, I want to turn off clipping first because I actually want the gap. So now I'm going to turn clipping back on before I forget. And then I'm going to command click to select all along the way here. And then I'm going to press G and move along the x-axis, sort of like move in here. So I can tell that my photo's not centered. I'm going to be adjusting my photos constantly. I'm going to try and find reference points so I know where it's coming from, but I'm going to move it like this. Now, I can see in this photo that she's wearing a plaid shirt that's like a little bit flowy. You can see this like sort of like hard angle here. That means the shirt's too flowy. So I'm going to make some estimations just based on like what I can guess from this photo. Press our E key here and we can start making our arms. And then we can go a little further. I'm going to scale it in a little bit. And then go a little further. You can see that. I'm going to scale down on the Z-axis. I'll do the same from the Y-axis. I'm just starting with this basic shape, and you can totally see this is a human torso. We can keep increasing geometry to like sort of give it some structure. You'll notice that I have a loop selected here, and I want it to be flat. And a great way to do that is by scaling, so that's S, and then we're going to select the Z-axis and press 0 to completely scale it out. And now it kind of returns some shape to our waistline, which will be nice if we want to add like a belt or something. So if I press Shift Z, I can activate wireframe mode. So if I ever just want to see like a line up against the back of what I'm doing, I know that's not super pronounced from what you can see here, but like you can see how that my line is actually getting more well defined. Go back to the front here. So it's great that we have these legs, but they're sort of the wrong shape. And this is just the beginning for all of this stuff. So I'm going to use that trick to flatten some more with the scale and the Z key. If I move these together, you can see that auto merge and clip want to bring them together. So I never want to bring them that close. This is another time where sometimes the person won't be standing perfectly square to you, and like you'll want to move the photo again. It's like it's just never going to be completely perfect. That's okay. So we got some knees. I'm gonna press Command plus or Control plus. I was a Mac user for a really long time, but that is the way you would do it on a Mac. Now I'm gonna scale in on the Y-axis, pull that in. You can start to see that like sometimes just naturally pulling things with this subdivision modifier tends to create what we're looking for. A lot of times what I'll do here, like at this point, like I want to select a little line in here, and I can select it, okay, just like clicking next to it, and that's fine. But sometimes I want to confirm I got the right thing, so I will press Shift Z to get wireframe view, and then I'll drag select it to be able to get like a perfect line. And I'm doing this 100% the way I would do it. So you'll notice as we keep going here, let's use our little trick again. Press 2, move in. You'll notice that we will start to see things get incorrect. So we can press Alt-Z to go into this, like, it's called X-ray, but I think of it as like ghost mode. It'll work just like wireframe mode, but sometimes this can be really helpful for lining things up. So you can see, because we're losing our shape in some of these places, or we're creating too much shape. Oops, we just want, yeah, see, so we've created like a whole thing here. Alt-Z again to get out of that. Press 3. I'm gonna drag down. And then somewhere in here we have the option to be able to show how much X-ray we want. So I want to be able to see a little bit more. You can see it's starting to get really nice. I'm just going to try and pull all this stuff in as much as possible. Notice that the T-pose photos don't match here. That's okay. I'll move this one down a little bit. Because that T-pose isn't like perfect. It's quite all right. When you're taking the photo, try and keep the person's hand below their neck because it's really helpful to be able to see a neck there. And I'm going to press Command click to be able to get all this geometry. You can see here is I can start moving that closer together. I can do the same thing here. Oops, that's the wrong button. Once again, I'm thinking that this area right here is just like a bunched up part of the shirt. And that's okay. All right, this is the proportional editing tool. Helps us make certain moves really fast, and it will include other pieces of geometry that are within its radius. So I can kind of use that to like bring together the legs here. Legs are a little weird because you can see this photo. Oops, Alt Z. And this probably needs to be centered a little bit more. The backs of legs, I think, tend to be a little bit skinnier. The fronts end up actually being thicker. I want to turn off that proportional editing tool, pressing the O key. Then I'm going to loop select, and I'm just going to drag this in a little bit. Now, you see that merger happened. I'm going to let that ride for a second, but I can adjust the merge. I'm making a really slight adjustment because I can use the shift button. You can see I have shift held down here. The shift will let me make really minute changes. So the second I got that, like that's enough. Great. Well, the merge is at 0 now, which we don't want it at 0. We just want it to stop pestering us. You can see that it's like basically this kneecap pretty much is at 0, so that's the problem. So it can just be a very minute merge. The hip crease is a little too low, or the pelvic floor is too low, I guess. And I'm gonna add another line here just so I can like manipulate things, and I can like add back shape. Her shoulders are way too wide. That's just not like where they're actually going to be. Right? So some stuff we're going to have to eye, like you can create shoulder blades by pushing this layer in. So you can see it's like the sort of the start of a shoulder blade. A lot of times I will like over dramatize the shoulder blade by like pulling it out a little bit here. And that's like a little bit more like what you would see on the person. You'll get into sections where you don't have as much geometry, and it will be difficult to get the feel for what you're supposed to do. Sometimes you can just kind of stretch it inwards a little bit. So yeah, like I'll shift G to like pull that in. And remember, the shape of the box actually doesn't matter. The shape of the subdivision is what's really important. So like we can like sort of widen there then. Like, and then I'm going to turn on shade smooth just because I think I'm getting the wrong idea in some places from how I'm looking at the yeah. Okay, yeah. So like one big problem is like I've moved this very far up. So like I have, without really intending to. So like that ends up becoming a problem. That looks all right, I guess. Notice I've become eerily quiet when discussing anatomy at this point. We're going to keep it that way. We're going to keep it classy. We're all keeping it classy. But you can totally see we started with a cube and now we've got a person. Like how crazy is that? It just feels great. Then I can see once again we have that inset problem. All right. I'm going to create a neck pressing the E key. And I'm only going to bring it up a little bit, and then I'm going to press the S key to bring it in. I'll press the G key again and slide it along the X-axis, and then I'll actually be able to kind of create my inset. Press S again to like bring it out. And we're just going to use all of these tools in concert together to kind of create what we're looking for. Now, these are pretty crunkly shoulders, so like we can kind of deal with that here. Bring this whole thing down a smidge. This the other thing is like necks kind of like arc through the middle. Yeah. We can start actually doing the neck. Press G to bring it together. So you can see starting to get a neck. That looks pretty good actually. Except should be a little wider. Now I need some things to agree down below that, so I use my proportional editing by pressing O. Not a lot, but a little bit. And then we'll start to turn the neck up. When we make the next one, you can see it will actually fill everything out a lot more. So loop select here. I'm going to slide it down by pressing double G. The double G slide, which totally sounds like a pretty gangster dance move. All right, so this is actually a really good start. So we have like a basic body mesh, and we can work from here. So we need to make all the extremities. And that's where things get a little bit hard. Like the basic body mesh is actually the easy part, which is most of the model. We shade smooth. We can see we did a pretty good job here. I can think of like a few things to fix. Make sure that there's also like an element of portraiture to this where you would like want to like, you'd want someone to look a way that like they thought was flattering too, which is, it's kind of a bigger deal than you might expect. So, and then you run into areas here where you kind of end up like, the way I'm doing this now is really great for men, but for females, you can see it's like sort of like there's a lot of compromises involved in the way we're doing this now. I'm trying to add femininity here without being, without being too... And then this is kind of cheating, but like we're gonna kind of like rotate this to like align with what we're doing here. And like we'll kind of, actually this is probably a good moment to like rotate both back to like normal. Except you'll see that we're not really rotating in edit mode. It's a good time to talk about this. So you can already see that we're a little bit off of our origin point. So the origin point always has to be in the center in Blender. So the easiest way to fix this is to right click and then set origin and then origin to 3D cursor. Now, what if your 3D cursor is not in the center? So if you press Shift S, you get the option to change that. So Shift S and then click center origin center to do that thing. Yeah. So we'll start with feet because feet are really easy. Feet are like one of the things that are going to break our like typical loop system. Let's check our measuring cube. Do we still have room for a head? Yes, we do. Select faces here. Press the E key to drag down. And then I'll do it again, I guess, because I want like the opportunity to do ankles. But then I'm going to press the E key again and move forward to make feet. So this is a little awkward. I'm going to press Command plus to select. I'm going to press Command minus again, actually, I'm going to press it twice and then press minus twice. And you see that actually isolated all the geometry that I wanted because of the way that those two commands work. So when I press 3 here, now that I'm selecting everything, I can just select and rotate that way. Now, this is obviously not an orthographic photo, so it's not perfect. The feet always end up never looking right from the reference photos, and that is fine. I'm gonna widen them a little bit because the feet do get widened out, and more so on one side than the other. Press 2 to get edges, and then I'm gonna sort of like bring them down here, and then I'm gonna like 3, and then I'm gonna flatten the bottoms. Feet here. I'm gonna make an edge loop cut so I can do a little bit more. I'm gonna G slide down here. See, they're great. They're just like a little bit wide. So if I move the feet in here, it's starting to like mimic that curvature of a foot. This is the part where you're probably just gonna have to follow me and like go with it because I've just done this enough to know. Whereas if you don't really think about what the underside of a foot looks like, it can get a little hard to do this. And then you also, you want the heels not to be as wide as that. Heels kind of have their own thing here, and this is gonna stretch out. And we're kind of sculpting now, more so than before. We're like sculpting things in. And now the question comes up about whether or not you make toes. So that's sort of a dealer's choice thing. So we'll do toes to do it. And if you decide that you hate this, then don't do it. Like, you can totally get away without doing the toes. It's fine. But specifically for me, like if I'm working on a character that doesn't have any toes showing, I don't make them. It's a waste of time and it will mess up. It'll make other processes more complicated down the line. How do we do this? Right? So we have a limited amount of geometry, and we could make an edge loop down the front, but then we've cut everything. And that's not going to be our worst edge loop. We totally could make that edge loop here. But what else could we do? So we could subdivide by just right-clicking and pressing subdivide. And the trick is that like once we do that, then suddenly we're losing some of our edge loop perfection. We want those edge loops to be just right. Now, there's no good answer here. Like, everything we do is going to be a little bit screwed up. At least for my method and my talent and skill at this point in time, like I don't always get it perfect. So that's okay. We're going to do the best we can with this for what it is. So I think I would choose to extrude once, subdivide, and then you'll notice we've got all of this geometry here. I would kind of pull this out. You can see actually we're making a little bridge. And pull things in a little bit. And then I'm just gonna press K to use the knife tool. I'm just gonna create new geometry in the middle. Now you have 5 toes. This gets a little weird, but like it's a stylized character. So if you want to do 4 toes, that's all up to you. So, oops. So I left auto merge on. If you remember when we were dealing with auto merge, we're going to turn that off. So that works. What about the pinky toe? Is there a place we could get a convenient pinky toe? We could get it from here, but that would be really messy geometry, right? So it'd be a better place to get like the big toe, because the big toe kind of bounces up. Now these are going to look super weird and dumb when we first start, but like they'll get better. There's also a lot of different ways to do this. If you're really attached to one method, or if you're a seasoned 3D designer and you're like, oh gosh, I can't believe he's doing it this way. Yeah, you're probably right about that. This is toe growth is an area I'm still working through. So we're going to select all of these here. Then I'm going to press Alt and Shift to shrink fatten, bring them in a little bit here. Now, important to note, we have a bunch of different selectable options for the way we make our transforms. So typically I use bounding box or median point when I'm doing all this stuff. There's not much difference between bounding box and median point, because the bounding box would have a median point, and that's what we're going to use. At this point, if we press individual origins, we can change the way we start like interfacing with our transforms, because we'll actually do it at the individual level. So we can do that, and we can pull in, and like we're starting to get friendlier toes here. We can extrude, and then like, okay, yeah, those are human toes. I'm gonna pull this out, and it's like, okay, that guy's starting to feel like he could be a toe. Then specifically, I'll take some of the bigger ones, and I'll sort of drag them in here. Gonna drag this into, and then you remember my cool little selection trick. So, and then I'm just doing the same stuff. Select, grab, rotate, all that. So these guys all have like a second zone to it. So I'm going to make sure this has like its own zone. And you can see this looks pretty good. And then we can start to kind of like bring these in a little bit more, and they start to look a lot more human. Click in, select everything. Move this back a little bit, because there is like sort of a hierarchy of toes. Like maybe double G slide to like bring this back in a little bit. Yeah, now we've got fairly performant human toes. Get them in like a good space. Remember, this one is like, there's that Seinfeld joke about how there's like the big toe is like the captain of the toes. That wasn't supposed to happen. Guaranteedly not supposed to happen that way. Yeah. Yep. And we're gonna just sort of like bring it in till we have something that we like. And to me, they look like she looks a little long in the toes. That's not the expression. It's like long in the tooth. I forget what that expression means, so that's probably dangerous. So let's just peel them all back a little bit here. Make sure you get them all selected. It's a big deal. We're still looking a little funny over here. We can make a couple selections. And then sort of pull them up. We want things to kind of like proceed from there. Press 1 to grab a vertex and drop this guy a little bit. Same thing here. Gonna like chill out a shape. gonna like bring this in here to like sort of step that in. We've created a little bit of a mess down here with this geometry, which is fine. We can like, you know, we can negotiate this a little bit. And then I'll just scale this in to like sort of minimize the weirdness of like this extra geo here. And then, yeah, pull that in, pull other things up, pull this up to like kind of keep that toe arch. You can see we've done pretty darn well. You might want a little bit more control here, or like a little bit less wideness in the toes, but that's about how you do it. Now I know at this point you're thinking like, okay, Woody, I'm watching you do this and you're kind of just making decisions quickly, and I totally am. If I was like, oh hey guys, you do this with the toe and this thing and this thing and this thing, it's like I couldn't show you how I do it because I don't work like that scientifically, I guess. I just kind of like tend to start moving things where I see them supposed to be moved. I don't know that I could give you a great explanation of like everything at this point in the process, other than these look like feet, and that's the important part. I'm gonna slide these up, and the other thing we can do here is we can mess around with ankles. So let's like, all we need to do is just create an inset, and then the subdivision surface like sort of like goes with us on that a little bit. Like we can poke it out and then we can like shrink it more, but like you can see it's kind of just like waiting to have an ankle. Same thing down here, although this one we want to be more subtle, which is not going to be easy actually. So we're gonna like, maybe we just do like an ankle within an ankle, and then like Control plus to like shrink it down in there, and then yeah, and then we could like pop this out. It's like, okay, then what do we do with that guy? You know, that guy gonna give us trouble and stuff. He could probably be skinnier anyways. And then like this all looks kind of rough, but like what happens when we turn on shade smooth? Like, is it as bad? It's still a little bad. Let's flip this out. Use your taste. Lean into like what your brain thinks about this. Like, just remember the anatomy, like the human anatomy is very sacred. Now, here's the other thing we can do. If we use that like that edge enhancement tool, pull that Shift E, we can like make way more of a foot blade. So that's nice. I'm gonna flatten it out here. Might do the same over here, although this will probably produce like a little bit more sharpness. You don't have to edge crease all the way. You can kind of do it part way. I'm gonna flatten this one too and then pull it back up. I'm actually gonna create another edge crease here, just to like enforce the foot shape. Now, also, we don't want to spend too much time making it too realistic, because what's the point? Like, we don't want to make human feet. Like, we can leave this for now, I think. I'm not enthralled with these ankles, but like, it's like, if we're supposed to leave good enough alone, I can leave this. Probably make these like, yeah, legs have that little bit of a bow near the kneecap. Now, some people would make a kneecap, like a physical kneecap here. I don't do it. I just don't. However, I do think it's important at the elbow to make an elbow cap, because I currently don't have one. You can see it's like kind of slabby. Like the geometry doesn't necessarily lend itself to what I'm doing. It's not bad, but it's not great. The way we do that is we select everything, and we can do that bevel. So the bevel will let us take an edge and turn it into two edges really easily. Now, if we select this area here, we do a little extrusion, pull it back in. Like, we can kind of create like a little bit of extra geometry that would favor like a point. Now, gonna take this whole arm, pull it up a little bit. I'm just gonna keep things straight for now. And then I'm gonna like pull these in to each other by pressing scaling in on the y-axis. You'll notice that I can't do that right now. It's because we have our individual origins still turned on. So if I want to scale them towards each other, individual origins is the most help with scale. And rotation. It doesn't really change the way we do location much. But that's how we make like a little bit of an elbow here, which is very helpful. And because subdivision surface makes everything bigger whenever they're like more noticeable whenever there's more geometry, just make sure that you like kind of like tuck everything in a little bit, because like you're trying to make an elbow, not a doorknob. So like we want to keep all the geometry, but we want to like tuck it in more. Yeah, that's like pretty good elbow actually. It's just a little bit too far in. So I'm gonna stretch along the y-axis, push it in. Now you might think like, well, what was the point of that? It's like when it deforms later, when we start putting together the character for the rig, like that's when it's gonna like really make a difference. So yeah, once again, these look way wide. You can also, and this is like a super pro tip, whenever you're running into a situation like this one where I'm like trying to use a point to define two different places, you can also use a bevel there and then use it to get back what you need for modeling. So like I want that arm to like start back here so that I can like define the chest more. I have the ability to do that. Then I can move along this here. And I have way more definition. I'm gonna go ahead and like crease here a little bit more. Like kind of tuck it up. I'm starting to have something that looks like a real armpit cavity. Do like another crease down here too. Tighten things up a little bit. Okay, so I'm noticing this looks weird. Notice if I dissolve vertices, it kind of goes away. So like this, your outer ankle is not quite as protrusive. So that's good. Are these toes rotated funny? Maybe a little bit. Yeah, they got a little bit of like too much of a banana shape. When I do this, I'm usually like kind of going all over the place. And I'm like switching back and forth because different things you'll notice at different times. Rotate this along the Z-axis and then just press G to move it, and like suddenly you'll have like a bunch of leverage over that part. And we can make our way to hands. Now, hands are my least favorite part of the process. I will be fully honest, and I will tell you that whenever I have to make hands now, I copy the geometry from my current model and I transfer them. That's not the greatest thing to admit ever, but it does work. So start by extruding, just making a wrist. Press Command plus to grab the rest of that wrist, rotate it so it's just right for the hands. Thinking. Now, remember, like, the outline doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to, like, you have to get the shape of the person. So, like, these hips are, like, a feature. So, like, because we're kind of, like, cartoonizing people. Like, as respectfully as we can, but we are. So, like, we're trying to, like, we're using the reference to, like, kind of get the idea of the person, not necessarily, like, their whole everything. And it's really, honestly, like, the reason you get stuck when you're doing a lot of these things and you can't get these shapes is because you don't know what button to press next, and you don't know how to get from point A to point B with all the different geometry. So that's why we started by talking about all the different tools I use, because with a combination of all those tools, you always end up getting what you want. So let's select this area here, and we'll kind of make it skinnier, because that's like the nature of elbows. The other thing is, we've been in orthographic for a long time. Notice I can't zoom in any further, and it's a problem. This is where you press Shift B, and then you zoom in further. We were talking about that. Let's do hands. And I said we were going to do hands. We started doing the hands. I got distracted again. Let's do them. All right. So this is my current process for hands. It's going to feel weird at first. I'm going to subdivide, and I'm going to do like a lot of subdivisions. I go like a full set of 3. And this is what I do. Hey there, Woody from the future here. You may be watching this part of the video and thinking to yourself, hey man, that seems like really bad topology. Like, that looks like that's really not great. It seems like you kind of messed it up there. And you can see that, yeah, I have a little bit. However, that's the magic of subdivision surface. So if I turn it back on here, you can see even this like weird indent I made gets sort of smoothed out a little bit, taken care of. And all of these separate polys here, even though they're making a massive n-gon at the end of the hand, by the time that we apply this thing, we're good to go. You can see that I have quads, 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 quads everywhere. Now, you might want to be more intentional about how you make quads, because quads is the name of the game, right? So we want to control where the loops are. But just in terms of making sure that we actually have them and that we don't have tries, using this method should take care of a lot of things for you, so long as you're not making any wild decisions or locking in any triangles. Let's stretch out this here, and we're going to use our proportional editing by pressing O. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to go underneath it. If we double click R, we can actually rotate things on this like orbital ball here. So we can do that. We can use our mouse, and we can like sort of like orbital track in like this. Since we're making hands, we want the hands to spread so that like the bottom of this thing is the palm, basically. I find that this looks really good, but there are lots of ways to do it. I've done it other ways before. It's my favorite like palm shape. The weakness is the wrists. It just like there's trade-offs to this, and the wrist isn't quite as nice. So I'm using the proportional editing a lot here to like get everything nice and spicy. So you can see where I'm going with this, right? So now that I've got these things here, I can start dragging out fingers. Now, you wouldn't intuit this as being the way to make fingers right away, but like an important thing with the fingers is uniformity. So like I'm going to turn off my proportional editing and like drag this out a little bit. Let's see how this looks with the subdivision. Pretty bad. It's okay, but it's about time to start correcting for that, I guess. So we'll pull this in. And then we'll shrink this one a little bit. Pull him in. You notice it's like we add more geometry, we get harder edges. So like if you scale that back a little bit so that the wrist kind of can be a little freer here. This is starting to be like where we'll have knuckles. But my characters don't really have knuckles. That's not really a feature. So now that we've got all these individual faces, we can extrude them at once, which is awesome. They will extrude that way by default. SX0. It looks like a flat glove. We can totally deal with this. Just pull it out. See, we can do that. Pull this double G slide to sort of like correct shapes by smoothing them into other places, and then we can press G again to just sort of like push them back to where they're supposed to go. Now you notice these are too big and too weird. So like we're gonna like pull them down a little bit. So like We're gonna get these like sausage fingers for a second, but it will be necessary that we do so. Because like we want like the good outline of a hand with like weird proportions, because we can fix that. Pull this part out a little bit more. This is where we're gonna get our big thumb. You can also like pull this out and up, because like, you know, you'll notice if you start like cupping your thumb in, it's got this sort of like weird shape to it. Yeah, this is the part where I'd say like I'm not even like looking at her fingers yet. Oh my gosh, that looks so creepy. It looks like a creepy baby hand. And for now, that's okay. Slide this in a little bit because it's a really big piece. It doesn't have to be a big piece. Yeah. Then move that up. So we want this base to work right. Push in. Then just do one more, I think, for the thumb. You got a thumb. I'm going to use that orbit ball trick again. That orbit rotation. Orbit's probably the wrong word, but you get me. I'm going to move that like that. You're starting to see how this goes. We might stretch this out. We might pull it to one side a little bit. We'll do another layer on these fingers. And now we can start to see how we would like make fingers look different than each other. You can see how this would go. I'm gonna select my edges again. I'm gonna start like pulling the edges in. And we still have a creepy baby hand, but it's getting somewhere, at least. So if we select these different fingers, I'm gonna leave the middle finger for now. We press Alt-S, we can do the shrink fatten, which means that, and I will include the middle now. We can do the shrink fatten, which means that we're starting to get normal proportions again. So that's like a normally proportioned sized hand. The more we stretch it out, the less weird it looks. We go to 1, like we can kind of get all of it. And then for now, I'm just going to move everything over here. That thumb can like kind of sticks to the bottom too much. Like I want it to, oops. I want it to kind of come up and join the rest of the hand here. And we pressed 2. Somewhere in here, we've got like another, like, it's hard to see here. We've got this edge here that's going to help us with like stuff with the thumb. It's going to be nice for the deform. So I'm going to scale it a little bit, move it back up, move it back in here. And ideally you should be seeing like sort of like a sense of clean transition underneath the thumb. Then pull this again, just a lot of pushing and pulling until things get right. That's what we're talking about. All right, so I'm gonna do something interesting here. So I'm gonna scale these to bring them together, but not like that because that looks so weird. Yeah, so like we'll use this tool to kind of bring in the center here. Now you'll notice this also looks super weird, and it's because of these knuckles. So we need to drag them out a little bit more and then pull them in. Like they need to play their part. And then, you know, the other thing is using in proportional editing, we can choose connected only. That's a big deal. We can like sort of slide that up, and then like you can start to see like these fingers can start to like move into like where they're supposed to be. Pinky, let's shrink him a little bit more. And like the rest of the hand should follow along. So let's let's scale the hand on that axis. And you can see like we're just like our hand is just a little bit too shallow. So like we can kind of like drag back here. We can like kind of push to the side. Thumb is gonna be the thumb for now. I'm gonna kind of like push this part. I'm gonna turn off the proportional. That's with the thumb. Yeah, we're getting into, this is like the advanced stuff in this tutorial. This is the hardest part. It's just getting these right. And honestly, we'll probably end up like redoing stuff too. I think it'll help to add like one more layer of geometry here. Because you can see it's like it's kind of where it's supposed to be. It's just in the wrong shape. So like yeah, move that back, that up, and then also like define the wrist more too. And then, all right, so here's another thing we can do here. Because we've created like so many new cuts, like we could at least kind of like extend them back. Because that's some of the response that we're getting. It's like why the knuckles look so awkward. Could like push back a little bit more. Not a best practice. Again, not a best practice. This is why we talked about that like begin with the end in mind thing. I'm not a game studio, so I can make models how I want to make them. In the beginning, for me, 3D modeling, I would get really crippled by that feeling of like, should I be doing it this way? Am I doing it wrong? And probably usually yes. But like, it's all a matter of just, can you get what you want? Can you make it correct? Let's make this wrist smaller. And either the hands are too small, which I am beginning to suspect for sure. Yeah. Or the arm is too large, and I think it's both. So probably a little bit of work to do here. And like, we can just do like a little bit more lengthening with something like this. And then make this wrist a little wider too. You can see I'm starting to like narrate a little bit less. I'm starting to move a little bit more. And you should be able to sort of start from the same place and sort of like work your way into like something that feels really comfortable. Then you can just start clipping. You can just start going, just start moving. And it feels really good actually once you hit that point. At least for me, that's the point where it starts to feel really good. It's like, oh yeah. See, I'm like starting to make this bridge of the thumb a little bit more defined because it's a big part of the hand. Here's another thing is like we've created this little crease here. Let's smooth it back a little bit, but we can also turn on proportional editing and then we can rotate it. Don't want to do it too much because we don't want to like damage the bottom of that hand. The fingers are bent, which makes her look a little too witchy. So easiest way to grab these with edge loops is like if you just want to do edge loops, then just go into wireframe mode. Sometimes I will drop into wireframe mode just to like out of convenience for whatever I'm currently still doing. This pinky, all along the pinky. Too much pinky. And then let's drag it all back a little bit because that roundness, that variable roundness is kind of like part of the trick. And then it is a cartoon. So like I want like to get most of it real with the hands, and then all right, so I'm going to do some clever deselecting here, right? Like I only want my fingers to be the things that I'm changing. So I'm going to go into wireframe mode here, and then I pressed C to get my selection wand here, and then I'm going to like middle click on everything that I don't need. This is a huge help in a situation where I have like pressed plus too often. And then let's get rid of that part. And I will I'm going to do that shrink fatten technique. Turn off the proportional editing first. And then this automatically also solves some of our problems with hands too. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more, I'm not sure. Actually, it looks pretty good. The thumb is a little bit too clubbed. Gonna shrink that in. Yeah. I was gonna say, like, the thing we could also do is like dissolve the edges for these, and that way like it's kind of stepped. Like it has to create this new section of stuff, and then it has to create this new section of stuff. Although it definitely does change the look for sure. So I was kind of liking how it looked before that. Yeah, that was looking better. Because a lot of the normals, and just by the way that all the shading that you're seeing right now is representative of normals, ends up being kind of a big deal. All right, we gotta make these fingers skinnier, because if you look at your hands, they're not just like big guns ready to pop. Here, oops. For other kinds of models, you probably wouldn't want to do it this way. You probably want to find a different method. It's okay. It's cool. I think I am going to make a cut here. Yeah, that added a lot. That fixed a lot of stuff for me. Like, one of the things I'm wondering is, like, would this help? No, it makes everything a lot worse. Yeah, because I'm trying to do two things here. I'm trying to, like, lessen the extent of... But you see how, like, that palm kind of helps us a lot now at this point. We can kind of... I know it gets hard to see, so let's change the game a little bit. So, like, one thing that's really cool that we can do is we can change the subdivision view mode. So instead of seeing the actual reference point geometry, we can look at it just in terms of, like, what the subdivides are. So for some things, that's really helpful because it makes us less self-conscious about moving the shapes in ways that we wouldn't want to otherwise. And we can see that everything is deforming a little better. Or we can see how everything's deforming. So a big part of this, of what's going on right now, that I can now see and is a little easier to deal with, is this whole chunk down here. This whole thing. Hands are flatter than that. Whole thing. Much flatter. It's not really a tube. Yeah, that's a lot better. I'd get really creative. You can start doing stuff like I'm going to do a little bit of an orbit rotation. Scale it in a little bit. Yeah, like you just combine these tools endlessly and like play with them until that you get where you want to go with them, and then you can just like you can bend them to your will. Let's see if that'll help with the hand edge. What if we got all of them? Like, what would that do? Would that be good? Yeah, it would help a little bit. It's not so bad. So we can mess with this for a long time, and we can find something, eventually get something we like here. But at some point, we're going to hit passable very soon, in which case we can move on to the next thing. Yeah, when you get like this nice, like for this particular cartoon style, when you get this nice like cup hand look, that's pretty cool. Yeah. And then you can like, just want to make sure that like, do a final pass to make sure that the roots are all kind of going with us in terms of what we want out of this hand. I am going to just go back through one more time, like, sort of make these fingers a little daintier. So I'm going to use that same, hold on, actually at this point I want to exclude the x-axis. So I'm pressing Shift X to exclude the x-axis. And then I think to me that makes the hand more feminine. Although as I'm looking at my hand, like there's maybe too much gap here. Like I said, it's always weird. The hardest part is always like hands. Once you do one once though, you can just keep copying it over for the rest of your VTuber enterprises, and you're good to go. So hands, we have hands now. Super cool. It's time to start making a head. And that's, I think, where we'll leave it for today. So we'll make a head, and then we'll start getting into little head details like ears. Ears, the only thing that may be harder than hands, which is delightfully hard. So let's do another extrusion. Kind of like create another point here. I'm going to drag this out, and then just a little bit. I'm going to do another extrusion out this way. This is going to be really weird at first. You're going to do it again, and then you're going to do it one more time. And actually, I don't... now you got something super weird. But, like, this is a great place to start. We're going to do a loop cut over here. And basically, we've just created all of the geometry that we need to be able to do a chin. So you can see me sliding it back already. Like, I can already sort of, like, protect the chin. And also, remember that, like, people look weird when they T-pose, too. Like, that's not how her chin normally looks. So I'm, like, I do a lot of slides on the head. So, like, you can see I'm, like, starting to slide things quite a bit. So, like, we want a chin here. In this case, sort of a rounded chin. Let's see. And then actually the whole thing just needs to get dragged. So I'm going to select faces, drag faces here. See if we got everything selected. We do. This is another area where it helps to like do the on cage look. So you can totally see what you're doing. And then you can just keep clicking. And I guess I still have my, this thing on. Proportional edits, but that's not always such a bad thing. And look, you can see before your very eyes how this is all transforming. This is suddenly becoming way different. And we're fixing things, and let's do edges here. Start pulling, and then like we're already actually very close to like the shape of her face. That's like also, this is already very, very good. Pulling this up, pulling this back. I keep the ratio to keep the chin. That's the hardest part for all of these characters, is just like you gotta trust the process like enough to get there. And then you can kind of relax into it. So you can see this is like sort of weird because we've got this like megaphone head thing. So we need to do a couple things. Like one is like we'll relax all these lines. And then, yeah. Like, oh yeah, already way better. Single vert here. We could do another band. You always want to start with less geometry when you can help it, because you saw how much geometry we had when we had the hands, and then it got like harder. So that's part of it. And then so like I'm trying to make something that's like flat enough to put features on, but like round enough to be cute in terms of our approach. And so like maybe let's try another band here, another loop. Yeah, that helps because like she kind of has these cute cheeks. I wanna emphasize. And then it's a little bit weird, but like once you do this, it's actually kind of correct because you have to deal with the hair. So you're like closer than you think. It's more like this, I think. And the head, like we don't give as much detail as maybe a head deserves. So like maybe moving the neck out a little bit because it's a human-sized neck. You know, we just want to like do our best to like keep everything like proportionality is a part of cartoonism, cartooning for sure. But like we want everyone to feel good about like how they're gonna look. Like I've done this process on stream before, and it's like, oh, I need to be really careful about my language. Yeah, just push, pull, push, pull. Heads I used to get super stuck on. Or I read a book about the order in which to extrude, and that's like when it all kind of came together. So yeah, I know I'm moving pretty fast now. Hopefully you're able to hang with us for that last part. Yeah, let's actually push this in a little bit. And like it's not perfectly designed to do everything you're trying to do with it. So like you just gotta kind of like play it close. A little bit closer. Yeah, that's great. So, and like because of the cheeks thing here, like we ended up, and also because of like the way we'll do faces, we'll end up with kind of like a weirdly flat outer face. But that's it. That's really good. You know, we'll maybe like slide up and down to like kind of like round out the head. Not like that. Yeah. We can use this as a reference for sure, but also like the way we're stylizing these is that like stuff's gonna get kind of like put over the head. And there'll be hair everywhere too. So if it looks a little wonky for right now, it's like everything we do next time is gonna like 100% change that for the better. Just as much as I can, just getting like just those little things. Just like you've seen heads, you know, so you know what looks weird. Like it just looks a little weird. And like maybe this part's supposed to be up more. Maybe it's not. And it's like it's kind of okay if it's like a little bit of a plate. Like I said, we're gonna be kind of like putting stuff on the plate, so you can see we have a perfectly good base mesh. After sweating it out, you know, and then kind of fighting with our subdivision surface and doing what we can with it and pushing and pulling and, you know, doing a lot of our location movements on our verts, we end up with something that's really powerful. And it didn't take us that long. Now that we have our base mesh, we'll be creating all the little details that make our meshes tick, as well as figuring out when it's the right time to start more advanced steps like rigging. As always, feel free to check out our Discord if you want help along your journey creating avatars in Unreal Engine.